Masticate. I don't know if David's here. Oh yes, David just showed up. Let's give him a ringy dingy. In fact, you can watch me ringy dingy him.
Hello, Your Eminence.
Hello, Your Influence. Have you ever heard these words run together in an alliteration of sorts? Malacca mystery, magical mystery. Malacca magical mystery.
No, I've heard Malacca magical mystery. No, the Malacca mystery tour, but to err is human and forgive divine, Phil.
Okay, well, good. They're going to have to forgive me for having my camera on the screen instead of my food, because some people don't like to watch me masticate. Which reminds me, somebody in a Colorado Army base within the last couple days, somebody got caught in his car doing something that sounds quite similar. But we don't have time for that now because I'm going on.
Masticating his food?
No, it's something similar involving child porn. But let's get right on to what the important thing is today. And by the way, have you seen my most recent letter to whoever I sent? Oh, yes, I know who I sent it to. Boy, have I been busy, and I'm going on a mystery tour myself. It's going to be called McConnell's Magical Mystery Tour. And several locations I could be at in the next couple days include Los Angeles, where there's a Malaysian Airlines office that I just communicated with, and I'll post that letter here unless somebody else has it. And I'm going to put you on the spot now, David. Did you happen to see the letter I just sent to the Malaysian airline entity?
No, I just got in.
Oh, good. Well, why don't you say something erudite, and I'll go find the letter and publish it here in the chat room.
Okay, I don't know about erudite, but just that riff on the Beatles song Magical Mystery Tour, we've sent out a post, and I'm trying to get into the chat room to just deliver some of the first paragraphs. We've coined this alliterative riff on the Magical Mystery Tour, the Malacca Mystery Tour, because what's intriguing, there is now information floating around on the internet in the cloud, obviously placed there by the Mycroft characters at the BBC, which suggests the aircraft flying under MH370, that's the Malaysian Airlines flight, that was going from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing on the 8th of this month. When it got to altitude, which I think is, correct me if I'm wrong, around 35,000 feet, and was north of Malaysia out in the ocean, apparently another plane, and of course this is exactly the MO of the decoy and drone maneuvers of 911, got really close to it, and then they switched the transponders off MH370 and appear, and you correct me if I'm going wrong on this, it dropped altitude and got much closer to sea level with its transponders off. So it disappeared off the conventional radar. The military radar would have still been tracking through skin paint, and I'm quite sure that the MOD's, the United Kingdom Ministry of Defence Skynet satellite communication operated by Serco would have been tracking this aircraft as it continued to head towards Beijing. And meanwhile, the decoy switched on its transponders and pretended to be MH370 and headed west into the Malacca Straits. Now, any points so far on that scenario, Field? Over to you.
No, and like I pointed out to Malaysian Airlines, oh, I just saw what I have in my pocket. Look what I have in my pocket. Electronic tracking for the 2 letters I sent. If somebody has seen my letter that I sent this morning via electronic tracking, would you post it? And if not, I'll post it when I get done. Most people can anticipate where these 2 letters went. Judge Rosemary M. Collier, and the president of ALPA, Lee Moak. Lee Moak is going to get the same chance that Alexander Plekcash had. Plekcash is the complete nobody who put up a derogatory comment at abeldanger.net and has not been seen since I beat him over the nose with a rolled up newspaper. And if anyone has seen the letter that I sent either this morning or last night, and frankly, my nights and days are all mixed up and I don't know when I sent it, but I will find it. Somebody else probably already has it. Yeah, I sent it last night. It's my letter. It's on abeldanger.net. It's the intent to file a lawsuit, and the lawsuit would be for fraud upon the court, which I don't think I can bring that lawsuit. So mine will be for financial damages relative to the early retirement of myself, which, by the way, is just fine with me. Why would I want to fly around in an airliner that might be taken off course? I never got taken off course, and I'm not getting taken off course with my pursuit of Alpha. Now, I gave some wiggle room because I am an easygoing guy. I gave wiggle room to both the judge and the president of Alpha. And I have met the lady judge face to face, and I can tell you she's wise enough. I anticipate that she'll take the wiggle room and be glad. We're going to find out real quick how smart Lee Moak is. Lee Moak, lucky for him that I've got a sense of humor, he became president of ALPA the very month that three of his attorneys, although just between us Abel Danger people, I keep saying there's four attorneys. The attorneys' names that I keep saying are all attorneys include Suzanne Kalfus, K-A-L-F-U-S, James Johnson, Rob Plunkett, and Peter John Hoonan. And what this is, it's called a gambit. I'm trying to get any of those weasels to rise up and point out that Peter John Hoonan isn't an attorney, because at that point I have them. Which reminds me, David, we do have them. And I'm going to go fetch my letter. Did I answer your question or didn't you ask me one?
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to make sure that my outline profiles flown prior to the decoy being sent in correct. So we've got until they prove us otherwise, and they're going to have to get really familiar with proof by contradiction. That is to say, if you have a valid, viable, physically consistent, coherent theory that fits all the facts, then the other party that disagrees with you has to come up with a valid, consistent theory that fits all the facts that contradicts yours. So we have, I believe, a valid theory that fits all the facts, which is that the Malaysian military believe the plane turned west and headed towards the Malacca Straits. They agree that the transponder went off. Now, they don't have an explanation for that. I believe that that's the strength of the suite of patent pool weapons operated by Serco that switched it off, but that's by the by. And we have a bunch of passengers' relatives who say the cell phones are ringing but not being picked up. And I believe there's about 15 families associated with the 15 victims who believe that they have cell phones that are obviously not available to the passengers to pick them up. And I'm not enough of a technician in cell phone technology, but as I understand it, when the cell phone is not picked up, it's then switched through to voicemail. But if it rings, it means that it's ringing in the vicinity of the owner or the custodian of that device. You know, like Barry Spataro and his BlackBerry, which he used extensively through the attacks of 911. In fact, he was an early adopter of the texting and paging system of the early versions of BlackBerry, which is very important because, as most Americans will know, BlackBerry is not an American company, it's a Canadian company. And the product is developed by the Research in Motion using the Entrust elliptic curve encryption to keep out prying eyes. I digress. Now, at the Beijing airport, where that plane was scheduled to land, there's a very interesting hotel named the Langham Place Hotel. And the Langham Place Hotel is part of the Langham Hotel and Resorts chain that was, between the years 1989 and I believe 2004 or 2005, owned by the world's largest retail bookmaker, Ladbrokes. And Ladbrokes does spread betting and allegedly, and sue us if they dare, spot fixing. And Ladbrokes bought the Langham Hotel in London, directly opposite the pedophile-controlled broadcasting house of the British Broadcasting Corporation. Dare I say pedophile control? Well, how about Jimmy Savile for 4 decades inviting young boys and girls into his Jim will fix it show, and I don't know quite what the right word is, but in English we say diddling. And diddling is a sort of universal sexual term, but it's not very nice for the child, I can assure you. And how about Lord Boothby, who was a predatory pedophile, working closely with the Cray twins on a pedophile protection and blackmail racket run from inside Her Majesty's prison for quite a few decades. And Lord Boothby, who was a big star on the BBC, and he was in Churchill's cabinet, and he was one of the first guests at the Bilderberg conference in 1954. And going off at a tangent, if you invite hapless creatures like Bill Clinton to a Bilderberg conference, and you're able in the hotel to entrap the rapist, drug-dealing former president of the United States with children, then I would guess that you would end up owning said former president of the United States for the rest of his career. And I think Bill Clinton went to the Bilderberg conference in 1992, where he was looked over. But anyway, when such an individual as Bill Clinton goes to the Bilderberg Hotel with lots of rumors about how powerful the Bilderberg group is, one should consider the possibility that the hotel chain, its management and its employees and its investors are engaged in a global pedophile entrapment ring or honeypot, in which case the power resides not so much with the guest as in Bill Clinton, but as the people who are entertaining him and bugging his room to catch him abusing a child. Has he abused a child? Well, I leave it to Americans to work out the likelihood of that. Anyway, back to the Langham Place Hotel at Beijing Airport. When the Langham Hotel was bought from Ladbrokes, where Ladbrokes had bought it from the BBC, the pedophile-controlled propaganda, entertainment and news network, run as a Crown corporation since 1928. Back then, Ladbrokes was called Hilton, because they changed the name because they bought the non-United States chain of Hilton hotels, which presumably would have included the Hilton Hotel in Lahore in Pakistan, where Ann Dunham, Barack Obama's pedophile pimp of a mother, was running a honeypot entrapment racket for the Pakistan Intelligence Service. But I digress. Of course, it's easy to digress here. But then in 2004, 2005, or 2006, an outfit called Eagle Investments in Hong Kong, where Dave Cameron was a ship jumper, we might come to that later, was bought by Eagle Hotels or Investments in Hong Kong, which is a privately funded group where I can't find the beneficial owners, be that as it may. Eagle Hotels bought Langham Hotel. The Langham reputation, which of course should be running pedophile honeypot since 1865 with the first telegraph office in a hotel, and started building a chain of hotels in the Far East, in Asia, including the Langham Place Hotel at Beijing Airport. And what we know now is that the owners of the Langham Hotel chain are deploying Zigbee agents for the purposes of sabotage, assassination, and deception. What is a Zigbee? Well, a Zigbee is a human being that is constrained to behave in the area of a crime scene, both before, during, and after the crime has happened, in a very narrow fashion that we've summarized previously as spot, shoot, snuff, spin, spoil. So the Zigbee agents, many of them carrying tags applied to their ankles by Serco or subcutaneous chips, are agents that can be tracked into the crime scene and, without knowing the big picture, have a very narrow task to complete, failing which they're killed. So it's quite concentrates the minds, and as the French say, pour utiliser, encourager les autres, to encourage the others, that is other Zigbees, if they know that their colleagues in this Zigbee swarm are killed if they don't complete their task. So what is spotting? Well, spotting is spotting the high-value targets into the crime scene, because it's no good pushing the green to go button if your high-value targets are not in the crime scene. So high-value targets on 911 would be Field's classmate, Captain Chick Burlingham, in flight AA-77, and Captain Gerald DeConto, the duty officer of the Pentagon's US Navy Command Center, in Wedge 1 of the Pentagon, which was being upgraded by the British companies AMEC and Serco. But I digress. Sorry about that. It's easy to digress. So spotting is to make sure the high-value targets are in the crime scene so that you can press the green button and make sure that they're either killed or abducted for kidnap, extortion, torture, you know, whatever these benighted people choose to do to the victim. Shooting is not, as it implies, with a gun. Well, it actually implies a video shoot or a camera shoot, meaning you want the production crew, which is predominantly BBC worldwide, to be in a position to get the snuff film or the kidnap film. That is to say, they can bring back evidence that the high-value target has either been kidnapped, abducted, or killed. And that transmission, suitably edited, can go out in the mainstream news for the spin. But I digress. The third element or task for the Zigbee is the snuffing. Now, whether that's snuffing as in sodomizing Ambassador Christopher Stevens in Benghazi in a hospital, for backhauling the video to the White House so that it can be watched by the American president and citizen of the United Kingdom and colonies, Barack Hussein Obama, aka Barry Spataro, in the arms of his lover, Reggie Love. That would be a typical snuffing exercise. The most important thing is it should be horrible, it should be brutal, it should be savage, it should be animal-like, if you will. And the important thing there is the intimidation aspect. It's no good killing, let's say, a John Benet Ramsey in the basement of her family home if the purpose is to intimidate her parents and similar parents around the world into acting like script kiddies or Zigbees. And in the case of John Benet Ramsey, her father stepped down from Access Graphics, which was bought by or sold by Lockheed Martin to GE, and enabled the technology that was value added and resold by John Bonet's father, Sun Microsystems, to be taken over by GE so that they could effectively take over the defense, command, control, and communications, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance hardware in Wedge 1 of the Pentagon. So spot, shoot, snuff, spin. Now, spin requires some very elegant technology, because what you're trying to do is to take the insider's snuff film content and insert it into the mainstream news. And to do that, you need to break into the network timing protocol used for the internet with a layer or stratum or strata which is closer to the real time than the victim's strata. And there are 15 stratum levels of network timing protocol. And there's one that is as accurate as possible to global time, which is stratum 0, which is the cesium fountain clock developed by the National Physical Laboratory in Teddington in Middlesex, that was handed over to Serco for operation by David Cameron when he was working at Treasury in 1990 to 1993 under, I hope that's not any other connotation, but under Norman Lamont, the former Rothschild banker and then Chancellor of the Exchequer. So amazingly enough, you have a British company that operates, to all intents and purposes, the most precise clock that is used for timing the global internet. And all other intranets key off that stratum 0 timing signal. And then you have stratum 1, which is closest to stratum 0, stratum 2, which is closest to stratum 1, and so on down to stratum 15. So if your intranet happens to get pushed down to stratum 15, you're a long, long away in time periods, even if that's only a few milliseconds, from the people who have access to the most accurate time in the world, who have formed these Zigbee swarms. So the Zigbees have perfectly coordinated activities synchronized to stratum 0, and their victims are pushed down the ladder. And the technology that needs to be controlled to do the bouncing of one intranet from one stratum to another is produced by a company in Austin, Texas called Freescale. And Freescale make the semiconductor chips. Phil, could you take over for a minute?
Yeah, every time you get confused, I have to take over. So what I'll do is I'll take over right now, and I'm going to read a letter I sent today. Many of you, well, I don't know how many, but certainly numerous of you will have seen my letter. And this is sort of like playing guts if you're a card player. Do you ever play guts? Oh, okay. He doesn't play cards, not guts anyway. But for those of you who have not seen a card game called Guts, just picture this. In fact, you know what? I'm going to put my camera right on this letter so you guys can all see. I push this button. Uh-oh, hope I'm not going to. Yep, you can see it. This went from me to the president of the Airline Pilots Association, Lee Moak, Suzanne Kalfas. She was the lead attorney that got my case dismissed. Bad move, Susie Q. Then Michael Huerta, Spanish, at FAA.gov. I've kept him informed for the last couple of years since he took over from Randy Babbitt, the guy who was once the president of ALPA. Then when his airline went out of business, Eastern Airlines, he continued as the president of ALPA because they must have known that he could be manipulated and therefore useful. We're going to find out I think we're going to find out within 72 hours if Lee Moak is manipulated. We'll know from his response or lack thereof. I'm trying to digress like David does. There's 10 more people that this letter went to. But the most interesting of all of them, and if anybody wants the list of everybody who got this letter, I will, when David comes back from his fake telephone call, he dials himself. He takes his cell phone and he dials his house phone whenever he needs a break. But he's not fooling anyone, is he?
It's the only way I can get a decent conversation.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll give the floor to you in about 2 light years. So hang on tight while I read this letter. It's going to Mr. Hamza, who is the engineering chief at Malaysia Airlines in Los Angeles, where I may be, tomorrow night. I may be in Herndon, Virginia tomorrow night. David, your phone's ringing.
Okay.
But he's doing it to himself. In fact, I'm going to make his phone ring. Don't tell him. Yes, okay, so Mr. Hamza, my most heartfelt condolences regarding missing Flight 370, which is not missing after all, is it, Jack Mack? Anyway, we explained the remote electronic control features to U.S. agencies, including FAA, FBI, NTSB, and most significantly, ALPA, the Airline Pilots Association, who collectively have done nothing to educate pilots regarding the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot, explained at these links. There's a link to the newspaper article that came out 4 days after I filed Field McConnell versus ALPA and Boeing. So what happened? On the 27th of February, 2007, I walk into the courthouse in Fargo, and 2 Northwest pilots, now keep in mind Northwest is now known as Delta, 2 Northwest pilots named David Smith and Jeff Baird walked with me to the security portion, and I said, don't waste time emptying your pockets. You can see me deliver this from where you're standing. So they stood outside security, watched me walk over and deliver a piece of paper to the clerk of court. The piece of paper was civil case 3:07-CV-24. That was 27 February of 07, and 4 days later, and they worked 4 business days because I think I did this on a Thursday, so Friday is 28th, yep, 1-2 March, the next working day. Yeah, I delivered it on Thursday. On 1 or 2 working days later, Boeing itself published an article at the link that's up in front of you on the thing right now. The easiest way to find that link, if you want to mentally make a note, is Boeing uninterruptible autopilot plus 9/11. Anyway, the other thing here underneath the article explaining that 2 working days after I filed the lawsuit, they admitted they had one. Here it is, 7 years, and ALPA still hasn't responded. That's why I sent them a request for $15 million yesterday. They can pay it in 30 days, or they can see what's next. Below that, there's a YouTube link, which is the absolutely brilliant YouTube done by Craig Peterson. It's less than 6 minutes long. It's got some haunting music that makes it seem sort of spooky. Okay, back to what I wrote. The story from London on 3 March was published 4 days after I filed civil case CV, blah, blah, blah. Because Boeing admitted the existence of the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot, I retooled the lawsuit to become civil case 1:08-1600, parentheses RMC, that's Rosemary M. Collier. And the name of the lawsuit was Field McConnell versus ALPA, which exposed the illegal modifications, including the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot and other modifications that ALPA's pilot groups, excepting Delta, are not aware. We are discussing in great detail the methodology of how Flight 370 could have been flown safely to any of 108 airports, including Beijing. If it is currently on the ground, the BUAP has the ability to now fly it into a drop box, such as was the case when Whiskey 386 Alpha Airspace, controlled by Giant Killer, was the final resting place of 3 aircraft, actually 4, but they don't know about the 4th one, 3 aircraft on a morning in September of 2001. I am traveling to locations, let me find out where this is. I am traveling to locations of several interested parties this week and next. However, available at my cell phone number, and I hope nobody gets my cell phone number. I might have a little ringy problem. 715-307-8222 or email if you care to learn more. So I'm asking Malaysian Airlines if they want some more. We'll see. Everything I do is public. Today's radio show starts at 11 LA time, 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight. Link to the show. The entire show will be archived immediately following the broadcast. Ironic that both today's story regarding 370 shows an image of Air France 447's floating tail. We used that photo yesterday to announce today's show. That's what they call God doing the heavy lifting. They used the same picture I already used. And this thing, it might as well be Air France 447. It's the exact same illegal modifications that killed all those people between Buenos Aires and Paris. And we think right now, everybody's alive on Flight 370 and on the ground, whether it's Beijing or Diego Garcia or redacted. The entire show will be archived immediately following the broadcast. Ironic that both today's story published an image of Air France 447's tail. We used that photo yesterday. This is the key thing in the whole letter, so I'm going to focus on this and read slowly. These 5 airliners bear I think I spelled bear the wrong way, the signature of the Strangler's suite of illegal modifications. Adam Air 574, that was January 1st of 07. Kenya Airways 507, that was May 5th, I believe, of 07. Air France 447, that was June 1st of 2000. Gee, was it 10 or 9? I get mixed up. It's one of those 2 dates. It must have been 10, but somebody will correct me. A Sukhoi Superjet 100, that's the one that was flown into the Indonesian mountain, and MH370. Well, the U.S. agencies have not responded responsibly. Russia's GRU, that's the old KGB, is aware of the devices and they understand how Sukhoi Superjet, spelt wrong, was flown into its final resting place. This morning I sent a letter intent to sue to both Airline Pilots Association and Judge Rosemary M. Collier. These letters can be tracked at USPS.com, and the digits, you can read them yourself if you're interested. I'll just throw this out to any interested party. When I turn it over to David, I'm going to go see if there's any electronic tracks on the letter to Moke. So, David, are you back from your phony baloney call?
Yes, I am, Phil.
Okay, why don't you try to say something erudite while I go find out if these letters have left Plum City.
Okay, so I was covering off the Zigbee tasks, spot